Namaskar. Welcome to PGurus Prime Time. I'm your host Sri Iyer and I have with me Jitendra Ojha ji. This is episode number 7 of Bharat, Tantra or Indocracy, and we are having this continuing series over the past few Wednesdays. Before I talk about today's topic, let's welcome Jitendra ji. Jitendra ji, Namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Thank you so much, Sriji.
So today we are going to talk about why restructuring of political parties is essential, in fact crucial, for good governance and national security. Why is this? What are the reasons why? And to understand this, you have to go back in history and see how politics has evolved in India. One of the things that, I've heard people say that when you go for the training program in Dehradun, there is a IAS training institute, that the principal,
Mussoorie.
this is 30, Mussoorie, 40, 50 years ago, because my knowledge is 2-3 generations behind. The principal would give in one of the initial lectures, he'll say, there'll be once you guys go out of this academy, there'll be a queue of politicians who will want to give their daughters in marriage to you or their sons in marriage to you. Please don't fall for that trap. You are here for a mission. You are supposed to be independent. You should be doing what the government wants you to do under the Constitution of India. Anyway, so that was the initial thought, and then things went on, and now this whole thing has become completely mixed. You don't know who's married to whom, and all sorts of stuff happens. So bureaucrats also probably watch Yes Minister more than you and I do, and there is a term there called CMG and GCMG. We'll talk about that in a little bit later, because today I want to jump right into the topic. Now, Jitendra ji, you have been advocating transition from democracy to indocracy. You can see any of our videos to understand this. In this connection, you have particularly identified reforms in the structures and processes of political parties. I understand you also have described such a reform being critical for a robust national security architecture. Before we get down in discussing exact reforms in political parties, please answer these two questions for me, sir. Why do you think such reform is necessary? And do you think it is possible at all? Why should major parties allow such a reform?
Firstly, Sri, even before we discuss political parties, we have to be very clear. India is a very old, rich and humanist civilization. And success of India is critical not only for 1.3 billion people of India, it is critical for a larger, safer, secure and stable world. I think even West does not have those kind of ingredients. A few days back, I'm just digressing a little bit before I come to the topic. Some people from Japan said that it was Indian influence that had come to Japan, and that's what helped Japan become strong. So as a civilization, as a state, I'm not saying we have to fight A, B or C. It is very critical that India emerges very strong. Now political parties, 75 years we have become independent, and I'm one person who has been keenly studying each and every aspect of governance. I identified in my study, my research and general observation, as well as interactions, that political parties have become the biggest hindrance to rule of law and efficient governance. Not because political parties are blamed. You would recall the history, a lot of old traditions, a lot of old habits also find newer ways. So you would find that even though we have democratic political parties, most of the leaders behave in these parties as badshahs or rulers or emperors and things like this. You would notice, we say how there's inbuilt resistance to change. So when the first this train car came, this was comparable to a buggy. Even motor car was comparable to a buggy because old things continue to persist. Similarly, a lot of Mughal, colonial and other practices have persisted. I won't say only political parties, even bureaucracy we are talking about. Even your old style bureaucracy, I think that has to go for a change. That psyche has to go for change. But political parties are particularly critical because of the opaque funding in political parties, because of these whimsical, dynastic, despotic rules. They are subverting, unintentionally, they are subverting governance in one way or the other. And the whole political space has been cartelized and hijacked in a manner that is undermining high quality governance. And I think this is what is responsible for, I would say, severe underperformance of India. This kind of political mobilization is fracturing social cohesion and social bonds also. And in a competitive, globalized world, we are lagging behind. And I feel, secondly or finally, I would say that this structure and process of political parties evolved in the West, and they had evolved it to address their own requirements. India is good that some of these democracies in 47 or 1950 we borrowed it, but it is high time India indigenizes it, not in a negative way, but in a way to address its problems. So when we identify what is critical for our national security, how can we optimize our collective security and collective productivity as a nation, how can we bolster high quality governance? And in this thing, I feel that two reforms are going to be very crucial. India has to have its own model. One is political party and second is corporate sector. Now you think whether it is possible. I think with a leadership-driven initiative, it is possible. I had enormous faith, the kind of mandate people gave and the kind of trust people reposed in our Honorable Prime Minister. I was very confident, that he will usher in many areas. He will usher in change, not directly, he's not in a position. But a lot of forces in society, etc., they are talking about nation and national security. So ideas like this will come and there will be support all around. I know major parties, a lot of parties will be resisting to this thing. But I think if we convince them that this is critical for our not only survival but also evolution as a state and civilization, and we also offer something to them. In one of the lectures 2.5 years back, I had said, sometimes even when you are negotiating with plane hijackers, the negotiators want plane hijackers should go home. So some of these dynastic parties, etc., are like, people who have hijacked the system. So you have to negotiate with them. You have to give them a kind of honorable exit or something in return, not as a blackmail or anything, not as a bribe, but some exit, some via media you have to find out so that they also develop a kind of interest in this reform. So I think it is viable with a leadership-driven this thing, and it is difficult, but it is not impossible to persuade other political parties. Sriji.
Now, see, the problem that happens is that from the times of Jawaharlal Nehru to some extent, but definitely by the time Indira Gandhi came along, the person is the party became really the operative word. And since most of the Indian political parties, with the exception of BJP, are derivatives or orphans of Congress, they've all followed the same model. You'll have a local regional leader, that person starts rising, and that person becomes the viable alternative at a state level, and that person gets elected, and then that person starts his or her own dynastic rule, and this continues. Now, I was having hope that Mr. Karunanidhi, once he passes away, that the DMK, this ADMK, since Jayalalitha also passed away there, that the whole thing will collapse, and that nationalistic parties will start having a better say in the politics of Tamil Nadu. But unfortunately, what we are seeing is somehow the son of Karunanidhi has managed to capture the throne, and whatever be the reason, I mean, the public has reposed faith in him. They didn't think that the other parties were good enough. So you will start seeing this thing play more and more. In fact, I believe that Mr. Pinarayi Vijayan, who is a CPIM leader, is also starting his own dynastic rule. I mean, this is just me. I hope I'm wrong about it. So this thing happens once the dynastic rule sets in. They can't let go because the money for running elections, they keep it amongst their own family. And the money is completely there, and therefore the party doesn't have money to fight unless the leader gives it, and the leader won't give it. This is like, taking your cricket bat to a ground, and then once you get out while batting, you take the bat and go home. This is the same thing.
I think, the problem is far more complex than what you are saying, Sri. I realize this is most convenient because human beings, given a chance, they are madly in love with themselves and they would not like to shed anything. They would not like to give anything. But if you see, I'm getting a little philosophical, you can say, that at one point of time, man was cannibal. He was eating another animal, or wherever there was shortage of food. Or India, we were fortunate, that we had the most fertile land, so that kind of conflict was not there, and that is why we were a humanist and pacifist kind of civilization. But anyway, the progress started when from individual you became family, from family you became community, and so on. So family was always crucial. Once you started, we came out of hunting, gathering kind of thing. Then this family and communities, they become important. But then also from there onwards, this dynastic thing has started. Karl Marx, the great philosopher, which were hated and derided, and even others have said, they have different opinion. They have said that initial societies were all equal, and this kind of thing was not there, because nature of society was such that community was more powerful, and this instrument of family, even if they came, they did not try to overrule. But later on, this became a norm. Anyway, getting down to India, what happened, you see, 70s you are mentioning. Don't forget, we have had a long tradition of Mughal rule, Mamluk rule, and even before Mughal and Mamluk rule came, India, we had a tradition of republicanism or Mahajanpadas, but those had already died, and this hereditary kind of thing was there. But Mughal rule, what it did, or medieval era, what it did, I won't blame every Muslim. Sorry, I don't mean that, because it has to do with certain people and certain practices. You tend to be more servile to the leader, because in Turkey, you imagine Turkey Mamluk culture, what happened? That the ruler chopped off, killed all his brothers, all his siblings, so that there's no threat. This element of cruelty, element of violence, element of this thing had become. Today, India is not Hindu India. Even if you and me and others are Hindus, they're part of Islamic influences, they're British influences there, or global other influences there. Natural human instincts are there. So all these things together play a role. So what you're saying, even if these two stalwarts died, others died, this has become a kind of 70s. You're very right. The whole thing got distorted, and I won't blame any individual. There are always invisible forces. Invisible forces have an interest, and they're very powerful. So what happens in India, we say, the kings change, courts change, but the courtiers remain same, isn't it? So the courtiers will get around and they will find another person. They won't like to be on the front. They will find somebody who's more acceptable. So whether certain families or certain clans in Delhi, they are a victim or they are what, I don't know, but there are always powerful people behind them, and they bring someone who is more acceptable, and they support that acceptable person, and behind that support, they carry on their business. So this is what has been happening, and this is what has been harming rule of law. This is what has been obstructing rule of law. This is what has been creating kind of informal system, and it has not been letting rule of law, meritocracy, efficiency, etc. come up, and they sabotage, subvert big projects. Politicians, Tamil Nadu, somebody once took me and he said, in this particular project, it showed that project had been abandoned. And he said, total kickbacks, if you count, it will come to 60 to 70% of kickbacks in a project. Can a state grow with 60 to 70% kind of kickbacks? So what I'm trying to say that that is why there is need for some persuasive leadership to tell them that, look, this is very critical for our survival and growth as a state and civilization, and that requires, I would say, immense persuasion and as well as rule of law, both. Persuasion alone cannot happen. With a degree of persuasion and coercion, you have to use some innovative this thing. I will keep certain things to myself. I'm sorry, I'm not disclosing everything at this point of time, certain specific details, but I think it is possible, and that is the way we have to go if we really care about ourselves as a state and society, Shriji.
Jitendra ji, I specifically brought up Tamil Nadu because these people keep displaying secessionist tendencies. There's always a motley crowd that the DMK will switch on with plausible deniability, and then when the government cracks down, central government, then it will tamp it down. This has been happening for a long time. These people want to call the center as not central government, but they call it as a union. And they had this thing called, anyway, the Madhil Kutachi, Maninatil Suyachi, but the autonomy for the state. Whatever J&K used to spiel out, same thing these guys used to do it. For some reason, the J&K was contained within the valley. It didn't even come out to Jammu. It was okay. Jammu felt that it was solidly part of India. There was never any doubt. So those things are not seen here. Now I'm afraid the same kind of malaise is spreading to West Bengal and also to Kerala. And therefore now all the extremities are doing the exact opposite of what you are saying they ought to be doing. Who is going to read them the Riot Act and say you have to fall in line, otherwise I'm going to dismiss your government? Why is this government not doing it? I'm asking you a specific question. What is the constraint?
Shriji, I've been for nearly a decade, I've been in student politics, and a lot of senior politicians, I'm grateful to them. They shared a lot of knowledge with me, a lot of information with me, and not because it had nothing to do with my official position. I had not even joined civil service. And even later, I kept on meeting. One very hilarious incident, it was told to me, this is a fact, but, I wouldn't mention that. Because once Prime Minister of India decides, sorry, you are doing this thing, backed by information, I don't think any Chief Minister has can stand up, isn't it? But I have a solution to that. I'm saying, why is it happening? They can even stand up to central government. So I am recommending certain things where position of central government will become so strong. No state can, offer to do something like this. And secessionism you're talking about. Secessionism is nothing. It's blackmail. It's personal blackmail. Look, man has been extremely selfish creature. And we used to say, what Samuel Johnson had said, patriotism is the last resort of a scoundrel. So in our younger days, we used to say the first resort of a scoundrel is politics. I'm not saying every politician is a scoundrel. So, this kind of secessionism is nothing but you're trying to blackmail. So Riot Act has to be written, but I don't think that we should leave it to incumbent prime ministers or incumbent leaders. We have to create a mechanism. In that mechanism, this is also like a war. You kill these tendencies in a manner with minimum collateral damage and no fuss. Sometimes great leaders can handle it individually. But I suppose in India, there are far too many vested interests, far too many groups that have come, and it is not easy to control them. And that is why they are going ahead. And that is why when I'm saying that, that we need to reform in political parties, is precisely to address problems like this, precisely, tendencies to blackmail. And I'm sure that if we do that, 95% of the parties will come under control, and even central government political parties, even they will come under control, and there will be greater incentive. Let us be very clear, Shriji. One very senior Muslim politician we mentioned in your program, and everybody has seen him on television saying that they are safer in this country than anywhere else, even in the Muslim majority countries. So India has to be protected, preserved, and strengthened, because India offers hope not to 1.3 billion Indians, but to the entire mankind, I would say, including we are the real role model. Africans and Far East Asians, they are worried that why are we not not performing at our optimum level. So I don't think there should be any confusion. Far more things can be done. And if we build a stronger advocacy program and we bring about this reform, I don't think any politician in this country can dare, question unity and integrity of this country and act against it. And not only politicians, including, I would say, some of their cronies and stooges who make themselves indispensable. Criminals in uniform, I can say criminals in police uniforms and bureaucracy who are hiding, they are equally dangerous or sometimes more poisonous criminals, even though their relevance is going to be reduced, provided we think and talk about it. I know there will be challenges, it will not be easy, but we have to think as a civilization, we have to think as a state, because right now, we are not discussing other issues. We are facing an existential threat, Shriji, from two hostile enemies, as well as these internal contradictions you are talking about.
So
Please.
we know that one effective gate for all these dynastic parties and everything is the political process. If the election commission is strict and it goes through all the papers correctly, and then many of them will get disqualified because their properties are far more than what they file in these things. So there is definitely a truth problem there, and they can immediately be eliminated at that point itself, that your candidacy is not right. Here are all the other things. Prove that you don't own all these things. Put the money back in bank and say, okay, all these things don't belong to you. And so things like that don't happen. The EC goes to a certain point and then it puts steps back. The election commission is the one gate I can think of. Right.
I'll just intervene. Look, in the present system, in the present process, it is impossible to uphold rule of law. It is beyond capacity of any rule, an institution or anything. It's just not possible. So when I'm talking about Indocracy, I'm not talking about one specific reform. I am talking about reform in virtually each and every sector, where one good institution supports another institution, it empowers another institution. So I'm not saying that these are impossible, this is a utopia, this is possible, this is doable, because nobody else had that much of, one can say, insanity to think on these lines, and also probably exposure, and awareness and commitment. So I realize, what you're saying, that election commission could have done, A could have done, B could have done, C could have done. I have factored all those compulsions of each of these incumbents, what compulsions they may have. And that is why we are trying to build this advocacy program. I don't know how long it will take, but I'm sure if all our ideas come in open domain, there will be greater pressure, because, it's human tendency to hold people on ransom, to dominate others, to subjugate others. But, this, what does it do? in short run it can benefit few people, but in long run it brings you down as a society, state, and civilization, and that's what has been happening. I think in the present circumstances, it is beyond the realm of possibility for election commission to be that tough. I can assure you that, Sriji.
Before 1990s, whenever Session assumed power as the chief election commissioner, it was the same way. It was a wild, wild west. In Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, results used to be always like, it's up in the air. We don't know who was booth capturing. Even West Bengal. West Bengal was not. So at least some discipline was enforced by one individual. He said, I am going to implement the law as it's prescribed in the Constitution of India, as it says how to conduct the elections. And it made a difference, right?
Yes.
Now, you tell me, sir, you said that this is not the only place, other things have to change, but nothing is changing because the status quo benefits the people who are enjoying the power. And if you thought, so I had this grandiose dreams that with Modi coming back in 2019, that these dynastic parties will fade away, and in state elections that they will not be able to come back to power. Unfortunately, what we saw in Bengal, in Tamil Nadu and in Kerala is the opposite. Now everybody thinks that they can come to power in 2024. So between now and the next elections, you're going to have a lot more, fake narratives and all sorts of things. You see what I'm trying to say is,
I have understood.
Even when there was a chance for things to kind of collate together, they are dispersing. So whatever it is that you are saying as structural and procedural reforms, maybe you can just share two things, because we don't have time to go through all the things. We're already 20 minutes into this talk. So maybe two things you can say. How can we curb the challenges of dynasty, nepotism, corruption, and inefficiency?
I will recommend 5 changes. I would recommend that there should be debate and discussion. Not because, Sriji, you are seeing it politician A, B, C, D. I don't see it that way. I see it India, how my country is performing, how strong is its national security, how can it defend its legitimate interests as a nation, how can it protect its people. So from that perspective, how can we have a strong governance? So I'm looking at issues entirely from that perspective, and I realize that elections have become a war through ballot, where various groups, parties, individuals, etc., they are competing with each other to do what? To capture power, to rule India. And in the process, there's massive collateral damage to the country. So I'm looking at it. You're saying how to do it. I would say, first of all, party which is contesting at the state and party which is contesting at the center, they should be completely segregated. We should have 2, 3, maximum 4 national level parties. Similarly, 2, 3, 4 state level party. So a central government minister does not have to go and campaign in a state assembly election, and similarly a state assembly election, leader does not have to come and campaign for national thing. Secondly, I'm talking about fixed tenures, not more than 2 tenures anywhere. You are chief minister only for 2 tenure. Here also only for 2 tenure maximum. That is very the same. Thirdly, I would say there has to be a kind of cooling off period. If your father is dying or somebody is dying, sorry, 2 members of same family should not be there in one party or holding an official kind of position, isn't it? There has to be a cooling off period of 3 years or 4 years or 5 years when your son can take over. So I think these are critical for building strong community. This is critical for building society. Otherwise, what we are going to have, we will have some clans, some families, some cartels, some groups doing what? They are controlling society, and they can be subverted by outside forces. So they will be representatives of external forces plundering and pillaging India. So this is very critical for national security, and I feel all sections of society should raise their voice. Thirdly, I would say that district level elections or Jila Parishad, these have to be partyless elections, and most of the powers have to be delegated to them. And not only that, I'm also talking about some degree of training, some kind of not academic qualification, but some kind of qualification to join politics at Jila Parishad level also, or anywhere. There has to be an unequivocal commitment to national unity and integrity kind of thing. Thirdly, I'm also trying to say that apart from these things, some qualification, some filtration has to be there at every level. that we cannot allow criminals, etc., to come into this thing, because these innovations do not exist in the West. West does not require these. These are challenges specific to India. That's why we need these kind of challenges. Finally, I would say debates and discussions with an open mind. Not that you start mobilizing votes in the name of religion, etc. You have to appreciate that you are fighting for what? To take care of governance, to provide governance. You are fighting for what? To take a contractual obligation to provide high quality governance. So your debate and discussion has to be on that. I'm also talking about, if you segregate parties at these three levels, I'm sure 2-3 things, and then you may create a meritocratic kind of system. Who will join the party and how will you exit kind of thing? I'm sure it will filter out all kinds of vested interests who have completely cartelized the political space of India. And very often they are representing interests of our inimical forces, foreign forces, or their personal agenda instead of national agenda. So I think this innovation, if we bring it about, which does not exist anywhere in the world, but if we bring it out in India, we can completely sanitize political space here, Sriji, and our ability of our political system to uphold rule of law will go many times. Similarly, the Prime Minister will not have to be insulted by state leaders, because Prime Minister will carry a kind of dignity. He will not be in competition with state governments. And secondly, what has happened? State governments who are capturing most of the resources and behaving as kings and lords, even they will be brought down to the ground, because they can have only 2 tenures, and most of the power on providing education, municipal service, everything will go to district. And I'm also in favor of abolition of the post of DM and collector. Sorry, district has to be led by a Jila Parishad chairman, Adhyaksh, who has to be a local person. Create condition that a retired bureaucrat, retired civil servant goes there and he becomes Jila Parishad Adhyaksh, and DM and this thing. These people are reduced, they are given a position of CEO of a district, chief executive officer of a district, who work for this thing. So, right now, all said and done, because of this party system and these structural thing, as well as psychological habits, what kind of system we are having? We are having elected authoritarianism. You have election, but elected Mughlai Badshahat kind of system where, your son or others, he comes here, and very often you'll be surprised that in many states, I wouldn't like to say here, that opposition and ruling parties, they are in league with each other in certain cases. They are covering up each other's corruption cases also. They are protecting each other's cases also. They realize next time it could be my turn, this time it is your turn. And in the process, India is severely underperforming. We are going down as a state and civilization, Sriji. Our life may be only for 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, 80 years, but our civilization is thousands of years old, and India is needed by the world. So that's why this is an exhortation part of it. But those specific reforms, 5-6 reforms I have told, I think if we debate on these, even if we make progress one after another, story will be very different.
To even start, let's say that people are willing to change their mind, and India mind change happens only when India goes into a crisis. The crisis could have been COVID. It could have been done then, wasn't done. Like, for example, the center could have withheld elections for all the states from 2020 onwards, and say that you continue up to 2024. So one term will be longer. Fine. But everybody goes and resets in 2024, and everybody will go to elections at that time. They didn't do that. So in this party, the BJP had the numbers to make that constitutional change. You have a pandemic, people were dying. And you see, what I'm trying to say is, even when the opportunity presents itself, the government doesn't want to do it, sir.
I think it's not that easy, Sriji. Probably government does not have that kind of legitimacy or that kind of credibility to take a decision of this nature. Because moment government does it, all opposition parties will come and they will start shouting that this government is doing illegal, there's a breakdown of constitution and things like this. So it's not that, we try to blame, but imagine if central government, there are only 2-3 main parties are there, and central government does not have to contest elections in West Bengal government. It does not share an adversarial relationship with government in the state. The consequences or results will be very different. If it says something about state, it will be considered as an impartial entity. So that is why this kind of system may not exist anywhere, but given our size, given our unique challenges, we need to segregate. And as we said, 2 tenures. So let 2 tenures be there. that by any chance a pandemic or a crisis comes, let there be a kind of national government, an all-party government, and senior most person, whosoever. If two tenure is over, let somebody else come up, senior most person come up. But what has happened, all these political parties, especially dynastic parties, have become like what? Private limited syndicates. And somebody said private limited broker syndicates. Many unfortunate thing, that this should not happen. That they are there, they profiteer, they survive by, subverting each and every project, every major project. They have a cut or they have a share. Of course, our Honorable Prime Minister came with a new vision that he will not let it happen. But I assume that so many vested interests are there around this thing who are beneficiaries of this system. They have sabotaged his plan, they have sabotaged his vision, and they have sent him and pushed him in entirely wrong direction on in certain areas, certain issues, because these forces are so powerful, these forces are so strong. So what I feel, firstly, it is important that we build credibility of every institution. We create system, we create conditions which are very conducive for what you are saying. That look, there's a crisis, we need to think as a country, we need to think as a society, and that's not happening because of these political parties being as syndicates. Each one of them is vying for power, and for them nothing else is important, nothing else is visible. The entire election process has become so expensive. This is why I'm saying that if there has to be a qualification, you cannot bar people from entering a party. So even if you're president, you know it, you are going to be there only for 2 tenures, so you cannot accumulate a lot of money. Even if you are accumulating a lot of money, tomorrow you'll be eased out, and CBI, ED, or whosoever is there, they will chase you. So, they will accumulate less money, they'll be more careful. Right now, they know that they have managed a lot of money and they can manage things here and there. They can position their loyalists, they can subvert A, B, or C or D kind of thing. So that possibility will be ruled out. That's what is happening. So, Shriji, what you're saying is very valid. Let us not blame government. Let us create or any individual. And it is not possible for any political entity also. Because the moment they do it, it will be seen that they have an illegitimate interest. So that is why I am saying that, let an impartial, apolitical group of people, they may not matter, but let them appeal, let them say. And if their voice becomes very popular, naturally others will say, and we are not talking about very pedestrian-like ideas on which, you create one body and one body will see. Sorry, it doesn't happen that way, because those people did not have that exposure when they raised this so-called anti-corruption movement, etc. And you know that some of them have become super corrupt, suspected to be super corrupt. They're building expensive swimming pools in their houses, isn't it, from public money, some of them. I don't want to name them. So, that is why I'm saying create conditions where it becomes easier and we create trust or credibility in institutions. We provide encouragement to individuals or incumbents to do something of this nature.
Well, we have all questions, and I think certainly your 5 suggestions are very important and very relevant. Now the question comes, which is the title of what I had put out: who's going to bell the cat? How does one sell this to all these borderline secessionist-minded regional parties who are actually in power now? I can see Naveen Patnaik being a model state-level party person, but that is one among 25 or so, you see. So how do we bring the remaining 24 to start looking at why they should be doing what Naveen Patnaik is doing in Odisha?
Shriji, purpose of having this Indocracy discussion on your channel, an impartial channel, who does not depend upon government funding, who is living far away, but still he is carrying India very safely, securely in his heart, is to throw up these ideas. At least there will be some Indians who will take this idea. I don't think anybody in this country has done that extensive, that in-depth study. So we will expect eventually, we are vying for attention of most popular leaders here, most popular stakeholders here, not only political leaders, but also India's corporate leaders, also civil society leaders. Let us have a discussion, because what today somebody said, that how Chinese are sending Tibetans on our border. And I said, look, and somebody also, a very known friend of mine, somebody whom I knew from my university days, saying that India has to rediscover itself as a civilization to counter threat from China. We were a far bigger civilization than China. China was nobody. So we cannot afford to be inward looking. We have had a very humiliating past. We have suffered centuries of humiliation. We have suffered, and still it does not boil our blood. So I hope some stakeholders of India will be aware of this thing, and we can start a small dialogue, and then we persuade political parties also. I have not come across, sometimes when these politicians, they are fighting amongst themselves, they are completely blind. But on minor issues, except, when I say that, okay, you completely step down, nobody's going to go home and sit back. You have to give something to them. You have to create opportunities for them. That fine, 2 years, 2 10 years, you have been chief minister. Now only chief ministers can be chancellors of these universities, or they will be heads of these NGOs, or they will be heads of these school entities, or they will get some leadership training schools or something like this. We have to innovate something where they can easily relinquish their position and start contributing in a positive way somewhere else. This kind of structure is blocking it, and I think if we come out with some ideas, lot many people within politics also will come on our side. Imagine, did Abraham Lincoln visualize that his bill on abolition of slavery will be passed? There were so many people who were resisting him. But yes, me and you are nobodies. Nobody knows us. Just few thousand, 2, 3, 4,000 people watch our program. But I hope some other people, they watch our program, they adopt our ideas. We also go around them and we do it and we say it that, look, we are not saying it for our personal agenda. We are saying it for our country and our civilization as the most humanist and pacifist civilization than even United States of America. You also never had a woman president as yet. And you see India and Bangladesh. And, because our civilization, despite humiliation and everything, we have something unique in it, something special in it. Yoga is one of those, but we have far too many things. So that is why I'm sure if we persuade, lot many people will come. I'm confident because I'm not saying something either for my own personal agenda or interest. And secondly, I'm also not saying something based on a superficial understanding of issues. So I'm confident sooner or later people will take our ideas seriously. Even if they dislike us individually, doesn't matter. Our ideas have a lot of weight, Shriji. And you can grill me, though this is a short program, everything cannot be explained, but you grill me. I have done my homework very, very carefully on this. And I'm not talking about this now. Even some of my lectures earlier also, you'd find I've been saying two reforms will be very crucial. One is reform in political parties, and second is reform in corporate sector, because these are not that we want to take things away from people. We want to give them something. We want to give them dignity. We want to give them security. We should use their talent and skills and opportunities somewhere else. And we should not encourage people, to master the skill of, what should I say, fake narratives or propaganda or domestic plundering and pillaging of our own society. They should not master that skill. I'm sure if we create an alternative vision and we create powerful ideas, we will have many more stakeholders joining us, owning these ideas and pushing these ideas, because these have become indispensable, I would say, not necessary, but indispensable for a strong and robust India.
There's only one person that I can think of who found an effective way to stay in public life even after being the president of India, and that is APJ Abdul Kalam. He took up professorships in various universities that gave him the invites, and he spent some good time after his tenure as the president of India teaching and mixing and sharing his ideals amongst the students. What a great gesture that was. Let's hope that there are more Abdul Kalams around. Let's spring forth, and that is very, very valid. Unfortunately, we are in a very time where Kali Yuga, where Dharma is standing on one leg, and I can tell you this gets drilled down to me every day because of what I see, what are the things that I experience, and again, viewers, you have to take a call here. Two of us, Jitendra ji spends hours getting the narrative right, and I spend time looking at this thing to make sure that in a 20, 30, 40-minute capsule, we bring you some things that are food for thought. Yet today's audience has been very disappointing. I can still make up, you can still make it up if you listen to this whole thing, and please give us your comments on what you think of the 5 ideas that Jitendra ji is promulgating, who's suggesting, and see how we can start making a movement. This benefits all of us across religions, across cultures, across castes, across whatever way you want to try and differentiate yourself amongst the remaining people in India. Let's take this as an exercise. It's a fun exercise. And do please write to us on your thoughts on this program. And thank you very much, Jitendra ji. Namaskar. And we'll be back again next week with more ideas.
Thank you, Shriji. I must tell you, whenever I speak on political parties, reform in political parties, audience drops to 20 to 25% of what I normally have. So I'm not surprised if audience, this thing is much lesser today. Thank you once again. Bye.
Thank you.